Hi everyone. My name is Erik, and it's a great pleasure to be here today to moderate this session about charging. I work at the Norwegian EV Association, and we have more than 75,000 members who absolutely love driving electric. But sometimes, or even quite often, they have issues when they are trying to charge the cars. It could be at home, maybe the wall box isn't working. It could be in apartment buildings where it's difficult to install charging in the first place. It could be for those who rely on street parking and street charging, and that is sort of a whole chapter of its own. And of course, it's also fast charging. It's not always very fast. It's not always working. It's difficult to find, it's difficult to start, and it's generally speaking difficult to use. A recent example, I had a few colleagues driving from Oslo down here the last few days, and they had a few, let's call it interesting charging experience, what do you call it? Experiences, thank you. And I'm sorry to say, I'm not very surprised that they had a few interesting charging experiences. I'm a bit surprised they actually made it, which is not a good starting point, but they made it, that's good. But fast charging, okay, so it's a bit difficult to use. We also have fast charging queues happening surprisingly fast. And of course, on top of all this, we have the power grid with the limitations and also possibilities in the grid. So I don't think we can solve all the challenges related to charging in the next hour and a half, but we'll try. We're going to have a keynote presentation, and after the keynote presentation, we're going to do small, short, sort of on-stage interviews / Q&As. So I think we should just get started with the keynote. So I would like to give a very warm welcome to Mr. Dominique LAGARDE. He is the Executive Vice President, Electric Mobility at Enedis.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce this session about charging experience today. As it was said, sometimes it's difficult. So my first words was just to thank AVERE and AVERE France and also GL Events for the organization of this event. In fact, Enedis decided to sponsor this event, not only because we have a strong long-term partnership with the city of Lyon, but also because Enedis decided last year to boost its commitment in electric mobility and to decide, in fact, to include electric mobility in the set of Tier 1 priorities of Enedis. And I would like to take the opportunity to explain why and what is at stake, and especially because DSO's situations are not the same when you come from one country to another, especially in Europe. First of all, let me recall that Enedis is the French major distribution system operator, covering 95% of the metropolitan territory of France, dealing with 36 million of customers and more than 400,000 of power producers. You know that the simple world where power was produced by some big units then flew through cables and transformers and then was available to the customers. This simple world is now far away. The situation is much richer today. The distribution network operator has become a distribution system operator, dealing with local producers, local storage installation operators, and consumers. And we have also integrated the digitalization in all our processes and all our interactions with stakeholders. So that our mission our public service mission is now to support the energy transition as a whole with all the different aspects. And electric mobility ticks all the boxes of the energy transition. Distributed resources connected to the distribution grid, flexible usage, data analysis, holistic approach along with the local authorities and industrial partners. So my first message is that electric mobility needs NADs and all European DSOs and worldwide DSOs. The second message is clearly that after a long period of maybe 120 years, the electric mobility took off. Even this event here in Lyon, the EVS32, that was at its origin a symposium mainly focused on research and technologies work, is now the place to be for many industrial players on the market of electric mobility. The move is global with a double-digit growth rate, maybe a triple-digit one for some of you in the room. And the market is led by China, even if still a small part of the world is really active to date. Electric mobility will continue to develop because the positive signals are stronger than the remaining difficulties. As it was said, it is still difficult to charge, but the positive signals are stronger than this sort of difficulties. Look at the situation with me. The first signal is a vote. I mean that there is an alignment between the legal framework pushing the industry to move and citizens' expectations to lower pollution, protect the planet against CO2 emissions. And so we can recognize that this alignment is not so frequent when you speak about innovative activities. The second signal is genius, or all the intelligence gathered here is in Lyon, but in every labs, thanks to R&D teams, thanks to the scientists, thanks to the 31st EVS Summit. The performance of technology, in particular batteries, but also the driving experience itself, has been increasing quickly. It makes electric vehicles definitely attractive compared to fossil ones. The third signal is money. Money, I mean the investments of automakers and other industrial involved actors. They are significant. They are in the amount of several billions. If you take the announcement you have made, each of you in your companies, it's really amazing. This is a signal for large-scale sales to come. And may I add that I cannot see the same amount of investment in the other alternative segments of clean mobility. These three trends, vote, genius, money, will sustain a high growth rate in the coming years. Yes, but you have to help me. Electric mobility took off, but how fast will it reach the cruising altitude? Please help me to find the right figure of the number of electric vehicles in 2035. Within Enedis, we realize some scenarios, making a variation of situations in terms of economic health and growth rate, and also the attention put on the environment protection. And we can find very large scenarios coming from the top one, which is the French high-level ambition of half of the existing private cars fleet, so roughly speaking 15 millions of vehicles in 2035. But other, well, I would say bad news scenarios lead us to as less as 10% of the existing private car market. So if you have the answer, please tell me after the keynote. But in fact, the main point is probably not really to find the right answer. The priority is, for me as a DSO and all the industrial actors here in the room, is clearly to accelerate the transition in the short term, which means for the DSO in EDIS to partner with the market players in order to create the conditions of the large-scale implementation of electric mobility. I would like also to insist on the diversity of electric mobility use cases. If you go to Marseille harbor, you can ask the captains of 3 ferry boats about their charging experience. Because it is the reality now. 3 of them are fueled by electricity at the dockside. If you want to join Amiens, which is a city in northern of France, 150 kilometers from Paris, you will probably do it electrically. I mean, either by train or by bus, because Paris-Amiens is the first bus line, intercities bus line, to be 100% electrically fueled. Regarding buses in the cities, in France, as it is in all other countries, there is a strict regulation pushing buses to be transformed into clean buses, either electric or other. And so we have a lot of projects and a lot of realization already to fuel and to charge some buses with power. It is the case especially in Paris, because it was the regulation asked Paris to start first. I would like also to pay my tribute to my predecessors in EDIS, who started actions a few years ago. More than 26,000 of charging points are fueled by the distribution grid, of course, and they are open to the public. And this corresponds to a ratio of 1 charging point to 5.2 private car in France. So, which is quite good results, actually. It is far in advance than the European rule, I would say, which is to have 1 charging point every 10 vehicles. Moreover, Enedis owned private fleet of electric vehicles of around 10% of our light vehicles. So 1,800, and so we'll continue to electrify this fleet. We will buy this year more than 350 new electric vehicles, and of course we have with this fleet full experience coming from technical learnings to human and consumer-oriented learnings. So electric mobility needs DSOs. Electric mobility took off, and Enedis is already an active actor in electric mobility. So that is why, for these 3 reasons, Enedis decided in 2018 to select electric mobility as a tier 1 priority and to dedicate a team to drive this topic. Our ambition is clearly to be a partner with every electric mobility player to create the conditions of electric mobility large-scale deployment. And that means that we follow two main objectives. The first one is make it real. Make it real for everyone, everywhere. We are doers. It's, of course, we can speak about electric mobility of the different perspective on trying to find the right figure for 2035, but the first challenge is clearly to do it. It's clearly to buy cars, it's clearly to drive cars, to charge, to make this charging experience. And so, first objective, make it real for everyone, everywhere. For the DSO, that means that we work with partners to create references, to showcase through real operations that each use case of electric mobility is addressed, each charging experience is addressed. Whether you are private car driver with a private parking or without private parking, whether you own a fleet of cars, whether you organize car sharing, whether you live in the rural areas or in cities. The use case of buses, I mentioned them, boats, or whatever. Our ambition is to do it quickly, ideally by the end of this year. What is at stake for us is clearly to learn by doing, and then to coach and welcome every newcomer. The second objective we have is to prepare now the future. Because electric mobility large-scale deployment implies to fix now some topics which will bring performance tomorrow. The first one is make it work for millions of vehicles. In France today we have maybe 200,000 of electric vehicles running in the streets or in the country. We have maybe 500,000 in California, maybe 1 million or 2 millions in China. But we have to make it work for millions and millions of vehicles. That means we have to answer some questions. How to combine renewable energy generation and charging sessions. How to assure a minimum quality product and operations to maximize the charging points availability and the quality of electricity. How to include cyber security. These are some questions to answer to the challenge, make it work for millions of vehicles. Second question is, make it cheap. What will be the winning business models? What will be the final cost of cars and batteries? What will be the cost of the network reinforcement? Third question, to prepare the future. Make it simple. It is not so obvious. It was said just before. Some of my colleagues went from Munich to Vienna last November with an electric car. So they have also an interesting charging experience. We have to make it simple for the future. Why several plugging devices? How to facilitate interoperability? As I said, everyone needs NADs. So NADs try to answer in the best way to these expectations. We develop cooperation to reach these collective targets. On this slide, on the screen, you can see some iconic examples. We signed with the French auto industry to assure them that we are with them and the government to reach the short-term ambitious objective of having 1 million of electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles by 2022 in France. We signed also with the Association of the French Mayors to be beside them to integrate distribution network at the very beginning of their electromobility journey. We signed also with the Federation of the Real Estate Developers to anticipate charging points installation in new housings. We also develop a specific R&D program dedicated to electric mobility. This program is composed of, classically I would say, lab and field tests on equipment. Every new equipment we try to either buy it or borrow it in order to make some tests on the impact on the grid. And this is really interesting and important because we can detect the different quality of different equipments. We also do some simulation to anticipate a large-scale deployment. We also work on normalization within the international organizations. And also we contribute to innovative operations on the field. And of course, our R&D, of course, carry out some studies on benchmarks. During the last 5 years, continuing now, NADs have conducted a series of real conditions experience all around the French territory. As you can see, some are closed now. It's the right side of the screen. And also we prepare new projects. One about flexibility, V1G, V2G, and we try to do it at a sort, not a large scale, but an industrial scale conditions. And so this will be new. And also we have another experience in preparation, mixing car sharing and charging optimization regarding solar and wind energies. And so that is why and how we contribute to the large-scale deployment of electric mobility. I would like to conclude by saying that electric mobility is a collective journey. We are all in, public actors and private actors. You can clearly rely on NADs to foster electric mobility deployment. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you for an interesting keynote. You should just grab a seat, I think. So we're going to have this sort of roundtable interview / Q&A session. So I think I would like to welcome the rest of the panel on stage. So if you could please join me. We'll get started. First, we have Miss Juliette ANTOINE-SIMON. She's General Manager of Izivia. Welcome, thank you. And then we have Pierre, thank you, welcome. Kristof. Hi, thank you, welcome. Okay, so it's a lot of people, so please sit down. You have the names up there, good. This is oh, sorry, just need to see everyone. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions sort of in a sort of one-by-one fashion before we have a more open discussion. And I would like to start with you, Dominique. And in your keynote, you talked quite a bit about what you're doing. You talked a bit about what you're doing on R&D programs and what you're planning for the future. But you have already done quite a bit. Could you elaborate a bit on what you have learned already from your R&D projects?
In fact, the R&D are really connected to the real operations. One example is simulation, for example, for buses smart charging. We are able to simulate what could be the charging curve of a set of buses and how to manage to limit the load demand to a fixed limit depending on the different time in the day. And this tool is clearly useful nowadays, I would say, on a real change for the Parisian buses fleet. We work with RATP, which is an entity dealing with operating the bus fleet. And they are interested in such a tool. They already have on themselves developed such tool as well. And we have also, with such a tool, able to discuss with the different buses operators in around France. Also, we work at the early stage with R&D on something which is already now available for the market. It was the way to fix charging points on public lighting grid network. And it was a discussion between, of course, on technical side, but also on contractual side, in order to be sure that you can count the power used for the charging points and dedicate and calculate this part towards the total part of the public lighting network. And so we did some experience in La Roche-sur-Yon in France, which is a small city on the western coast of France. And now the technical requirements and contractual requirements are available for every market player to use public lighting network, to put some charging points as soon as, of course, the power is available. Maybe we can also quote the work we've done with different companies, the electrical installator companies, in order to facilitate the equipment of charging points in collective housings parking. In France, it is really a difficulty if you are, like me, in fact, living in a flat with parking in your housing, how to manage to get a charging point there. It is still difficult because of regulations, but also because of the fact that you have to be sure that every co-owners of the housing agree on that project. And so we have published some technical requirements all together with the private sector in order to explain to everyone what are the different types of solutions in order to implement charging points in parkings. These are some examples which clearly fit with the charging experience we all have, and we want to facilitate, as I said just before, the charging experience for each use cases.
Yeah. So thank you. We are in the middle of sort of a renewable energy revolution, and the integration of renewable resources into the grid, I believe that has been a bit of a challenge for entities. Could you tell us how you're preparing for the large-scale integration of EVs into the grid at the same time as you're getting more and more renewable energy into the grid? Sort of.
We have been integrating renewable energy in the French distribution grid now for maybe 5 to 10 years from now. And so it was sometimes challenging for us to integrate these new installations. We have learned a lot, and the key word is, of course, to anticipate. And so we are, with the electric vehicle, able to anticipate a bit more, at least in terms of the amount of investment, because, of course, the day-to-day life is similar to another connection to the grid. It's not because you have charging points that it is so different, but we have to anticipate the working forces and also the amount of money. And it was a good surprise to say that the first assessments lead us to an amount of less than 10% of the global amount of investment we do every year on the grid. And the part for electric mobility is less than the remaining part of wind and solar new installations anticipated in France. So that was a good news, because that means that we will be able to integrate electric mobility without asking people to pay twice as much as they pay now for the grid. So that is really important. And of course, electric vehicles are probably more an opportunity for the grid, or it will be maybe easier to integrate it to the grid because it is a flexible usage, which is not the case of wind and solar energies.
So you don't think that the electric cars we are going to completely crash and maybe even kill the grid?
No, you can be relieved today and probably tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Now, one example is that we already manage on the grid some load peak coming from wind and solar energies. Locally, you can have 6, 7, even 15 megawatts of peak loading in a short period of time, less than 1 hour, maybe half an hour, on some transformers. And of course, you have no news about that on the day-to-day life because there is no problem for the distribution network to cope with that. So this is the actual amounts of peak loading we have locally. So of course, if you convert the 15 megawatt into a number of vehicles, you will find a quite large number, locally speaking. And so we are quite comfortable with the future. Of course, the smart charging will help us because it will bring some upside, I would say, to either lower investment or to combine peaks of production and peaks of consumption. And so the grid will be, of course, in a better situation if we can, as much as we can combine the two flux.
So you're actually planning for this to be a success. And that's a very good starting point,
I think. It will be a success, and we do everything we can to facilitate the coming of electric mobility and the business plan of these guys here. They will have to explain, and this dear woman, she will have to explain how they will manage it.
Excellent, thank you. So I think we'll move to you, Dawid. So you are International Sales Director for e-mobility at KEBA. So could you give us a brief introduction to yourself and your company? What is KEBA doing?
Yes, thank you very much. Hope everybody is hearing me well. Excuse my cold. So my name is David ZAJKOWSKI and I'm a sales director from KEBA in the electric mobility. And we are an Austrian manufacturer, and we are doing a lot of things. So one of our divisions is of course electric mobility. Our background is industrial automation. We're doing also banking, lottery solutions, and heating controls kind of stuff. We have 50 years of history. So last year we actually had our anniversary, 50 years anniversary. So we are a company with tradition, an Austrian company, and yeah, my role is of course to move forward with the electric mobility and the change of the paradigm in Europe and the world.
Yeah. In my introduction, I briefly touched upon the sort of the user perspective, and how do we secure a good charging experience for the consumer, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Actually, because you had like the bad experiences you had, yeah. So this is actually what I'm about to say. There is only one question you have with a charging point, and this is what KEBA all is about: is will it charge or not? This is what you want to have. So you want to charge in, and you want to have your charge. So if this is not guaranteed, then well, probably you have a problem, and you cannot move. So this is what we do actually at KEBA. We can guarantee that actually with our products and what we do, because we have a certain approach to the product that our competitors don't have, and because of that we can guarantee that the charging experience will be a good one, because it will charge.
But you're only doing AC charging, right?
That's true.
So how is your sort of business different from other manufacturers of AC charging boxes? Mm-hmm. Why should I buy a KEBA box?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, some people say that we at KEBA we suffer a little bit from nostalgia, because we are one of the last European manufacturers. So we decided that we don't want to go to China and to Asia. We want to stay in Austria, in the heart of Europe, and to make sure that the quality controls and all the quality control basically stays in our hand. It means in our case, we do the SMT and the THD and the assembly. So all the 3 processes with 16 tests, we do them in-house and don't give them out of the hand. And because of that, our failure rate is so low, and this distinguishes us very, very much from other competitors. And yeah, we are happy that we could attract by this a lot of customers. One of those is, I believe, very known. It is the BMW group globally. So they choose us as OEM manufacturer. And yeah, we're happy to actually work with them.
How many boxes or charging systems have you actually sold, you know?
Yeah, we did actually the anniversary with 150,000 units. this month, so we're scaling up. And it's also possible with our units because we do the SMT and the THT and the assembly in-house, so the scaling up of the product is absolutely easy with us and possible. And this is what makes our customers very happy.
And they are happy?
They are very happy.
Okay.
They're happy. Yeah,
Good.
absolutely. You can ask BMW if you want to come to Munich and have a talk with them.
Yeah. We often hear about interconnectivity. What is it and why is it important for you?
Yeah, this is a very interesting thing. I think that at the beginning you had like this vision. Okay, I want to just charge. So the interconnectivity was just the plugging the cable inside the car, and that is about it. Yeah. But there are so many things that are now interesting, like the connectivity you would like to have with solar, with a smart meter, with a smart home, or with other third-party devices. So we said we would like to have this. We offer, of course, OCPP as the usual protocol that we have, but we offer UDP. So this is a user data protocol. So it's open source. So you can program our unit as you would like it to have. And also we have a Modbus for smart metering. So with all these interfaces that we implemented, and we will implement more in time, we'll guarantee the interconnectivity of third-party applications will be possible, and the experience will be even more interesting, especially for the end customer.
So basically we need interconnectivity to not kill the grid.
Absolutely. Intelligent interconnectivity, not killing the grid. And also you can already see that there are steps into in certain markets like the UK and France, but of course Germany, well, the infrastructure companies would like to have a control and see what's going on in the charging session itself, and therefore interconnectivity is very important to them.
What's your main market today, by the way? I forgot to ask.
So our main focus is basically Europe for now. Of course, with BMW, we are global, so we are certified worldwide, but this is their product basically, so we just sell them directly to them. But mainly we are focusing now on Europe.
So good. Charging boxes are still way too expensive, in my opinion.
Yes, okay, everybody has a right to have an opinion. We are in a democracy, so.
But will we start to see the prices being more reasonable going forward with larger volumes? EVs becoming more mainstream?
Yeah, this is probably where Jacques will pick up because he's coming from China and will tell us more about the pricing in China regarding charging stations. But I think that our prices are still reasonable, and like with every electronic device and with the scalability and the advent of electric cars, you will see, of course, a decline of the pricing, and this will happen. So you will see a raise of the products, and you will have a decline of the price. So this is basically how it always works, and yeah.
But are we starting to see that curve sort of taking effect? Should we expect it to sort of
well,
be
as a sales director, well, probably I don't want to see that's well, and I want to see it the next day. But of course, on a customer's perspective, and this is what it's all about, definitely that we will see it in a couple of years, so maybe 2 or 3 years already. Yeah. You can see really like a downfall on the prices, definitely. Yeah.
But I'll ask EVBox the same question afterwards. So
I'm sure, yeah, sure. It's no problem.
Actually, EVBox is my next speaker. So Kristof, you are
Hello.
the CEO of EVBox.
Yes.
Could you please tell us who you are and what is EVBox?
Well, the world is in danger, and e-mobility is a part of the solution. 91% of the people worldwide are breathing polluted air, and 23% of CO2 emissions is coming from transport. Luckily, electric vehicles are helping to reduce EV charging CO2 emissions, and we see a trend in general of more and more renewable, sustainable energy. Battery prices are dropping and more EVs. I mean, if you look to Bloomberg, they're expecting about 30 million cars in 2025. And that's actually where the link is with our company. I mean, the more cars you need, the more charging infrastructure that is needed. And we have the unfair advantage that we started a business in the Netherlands in EV charging 10 years ago. In the meantime, we have built out towards a connected number of stations of 75,000. We also have an automotive division, but there we don't disclose the numbers because we work in tier 1 for the OEMs, and those numbers are not disclosed. But that's what we do. We offer scalable charging solutions, hardware from 3 up to 350 kilowatts, so AC, DC, and HPC, as well software through a separate company, a cloud platform as a service. Headquartered in Amsterdam, we have offices throughout Europe and in the US. We're about 350 people right now. We do manufacture also everything in Europe and in the United States, so not in China. So that it's, and actually, especially in the States, it's more and more important that you made it there, so you can actually, you're not punished by the taxes. So that's what we are actually doing as a company, helping to evolve this industry together. I mean, creating, working on and supporting open standards and pushing the growth of the industry together with all colleagues.
You mentioned that you have roughly 350 employees, and you told me earlier that you've been growing very fast for the last couple of years. The industry is sort of zooming along very fast. Changes are happening very fast. How can you as a company sort of cope with the pace of change and acceleration that the industry is facing? How are you sort of working to stay on your toes and sort of be relevant and be at the front?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, it always starts with our culture, our team. We call ourselves EVBoxers. We have a fantastic team of people, 40 nationalities from all over the world, that really also want to be part of a company that helps on the zero emission mobility goal. And we are a specialist, so it's the only thing we do as a company. We don't do anything else than EV charging, and that's where we focus on, that's where we go after. So the team, the culture is very important. But beside that also is that the importance of investing a lot in development engineering is crucial. We have more than 150 people in development engineering, so it's a lot on the total of 350. So it's every day, I mean, pushing the needle to the next step and developing new products with new features. Also for the industry, I mean, the OEMs, where you really bring it to the next level. And that will help to bring more volume and economy of scale, and will indeed reduce cost over time.
Yeah. Is most of the development on software or on the hardware side?
It's on both sides. I mean, and even if you talk hardware, you have the embedded software, the firmware, which is also important. That type of software is also important because that's how you connect to solar, to battery, etc. Internet of Things. So also there, the software part is very important. Yeah.
And at least in Norway, I think this is also happening in other countries. We've had a long-running discussion on EVs and safety, or the fire hazard of EVs, which we have absolutely no proof that there is a fire hazard at all if you do this correctly. But still, how are you making sure that the products you're launching are sort of safe and user-friendly as you continue to update these products all the time?
Ease of use is crucial, but also, I mean, safety. I mean, and of course, the industry has evolved, and also companies have evolved. If I look how we developed a product 2 or 3 years ago and how we do it today, it's getting to a different level. Where, I mean, also the testing that you do, design validation, A sample, B sample, C sample type of testing, which is taking way more effort and way more energy. I mean, time to do it, but it's crucial, especially if you want to ship afterwards products on a global level in larger volume. You have to make sure that number one is safety.
We talked a bit about this, or Dominique talked a bit about it, but so the charging industry is sort of developing very fast. We have a lot of different sort of roles. We have, or different stakeholders. We have the utility companies, we have the car manufacturers, we have the car industry. What else do we need to make this happen, Kristof? Or are everyone? Do we need more companies or more sectors to actually work on EV charging to make this happen, or are we covering all the sort of different relevant bases?
I think we cover every aspect, I guess. Maybe we have to speak a bit more about data also, data management, data analysis and data treatment. But I think the main topic today is to cooperate, and to cooperate on some priorities. And my own perception, but I'm not totally in the business, but my perception is that the priority is clearly that people buy cars. And after that, we can develop a lot of smart charging, smart V2G, etc., etc. But we need people to buy cars. And you know that, and probably some of you who drive car today, electric car, they don't want to go back to fossil cars. So I think the best move we have to manage collectively is to put this priority which is a short-term one.
Any input? Or?
I agree. It starts with the cars, and so far it was. I mean, we are in the early stage, and it was more a niche type of approach. But I mean, finally, as of next year, we're going to see more mass adoption, way more models, way more. I mean, also in all price levels, from small to big, on all levels, also commercial vehicles, etc. So the volume is going to pick up, and that's going to change. It will also impact our industry. I mean, I believe that. I mean, if you see today the show compared to 2 years ago, it has grown. On the other hand, you will see more consolidation happening. I mean, the investments are becoming bigger and bigger, and there's a tremendous time pressure on the market. So I think there's further consolidation that's going to happen, and also some new companies also coming from Asia, etc.
Is production capacity a problem at all, or is it sort of just to hit the buttons and?
Well, I think today, first of all, the capacity for production of battery cell and then cars has to ramp up seriously, and that will automatically have a certain impact on the charging infrastructure. In certain segments in charging infrastructure, you see a shortage, like HPC. It's known that that there is at this moment more demand than what the production can actually offer.
Yeah. And when will we start to see a price drop on the wall boxes from EVBox?
I mean, it's going to be from the whole industry, I suppose. But I mean, as I said, as volumes are going up and next generation of products are coming out, together with the large adoption of large volumes from major OEMs from the different continents, but also in Europe, that will definitely help. I mean, more scale, more volume will help to reduce the cost seriously. And I'm convinced that in the next 24 months that will start dropping seriously. Yeah.
Well, that's very good for the consumer, of course.
Absolutely.
So that's looking forward to it. So Pierre, you are the vice president of EV charging at Total, and I think many of us have heard a bit about your company before, but still, could you sort of tell us a bit about your company and your role as vice president of EV charging?
Yeah, so first of all, Total is a bit new to me because I joined the company Total a few months back when the company I created, G2 Mobility, got acquired by Total last year. And since then, I'm just building together with the Total staff a kind of e-mobility roadmap for Total as a key player in this mobility sector, and having in mind this major transition, which we are going to face, on as a responsible major of energy. It's very important to bring, and I think this is a topic of today, what kind of user experience we could bring, leveraging the decades of experience, maybe in a slightly different environment, but still that we want to do. So this is basically what keeps us very busy. And we are announcing this week a lot of interesting stuff with this launch of this new business line I'm running. And I hope we'll be relevant to customers, because at the end of the day, and I joined the point about the cars, the point is we are just as an infrastructure services provider, we just service customers, and the point is first to make sure that there is cars on street and the cars are relevant, which we are just a small part of the equation.
But the EV ecosystem is still quite new, and it's a bit confusing for the end user. It's a bit difficult to use, and it's different from car to car, and from charger to charger, and from operator to operator. How far away are we from a more mature market, and what needs to happen to actually get us there?
Yeah, the point is my personal feeling, and having in this business and as a pure player for almost 10 years, it's clear to me that we are not yet in a mature market. There is not all the signals that we are entering very soon in a mature market, because as it was pointed out by the different speakers, we don't have something which is very fluid, which is seamless as an experience. There is a lot of maybe not big obstacles, but there is a lot of roadblocks along the roads that we need to cross. And it's clear that it's going to be a kind of long journey. It won't happen overnight, but we have to make sure that we get rid of all these small obstacles one by one in order to be relevant. And I think we are making progress, quite honestly, because if we took the picture of a few years back, it's probably much better. At least all the key issues which are to deal with are probably now on the table. It's a matter of putting together. As I say often, for me, all the building blocks are there. We don't need to disruption or new technology, and so all the technology blocks are already there. It's a matter of putting a little bit of glue here, a little bit of glue there, in order to build something which is relevant and consistent for users and consumers.
You're doing quite a bit of different things when it comes to charging. You have different solutions, you have different customer segments. Are all EV users the same, or do you see differences between the segments? Is the private companies different from government companies, fast charging, AC charging?
Yeah, of course, and probably as for some other, especially the two people around me, I think we have the ambition and the ability to serve various customer segments, from communities to B2B customers and up to B2C customers. I think the point which is always in common, there is three main blocks which are really key for every single kind of customer. The first one is to have access to a reliable, affordable, clean energy. I think it's a key pillar of the stuff. Second point is related to the charging infrastructure, which means having access to a cheap wall box. I'm just anticipating the question you're going to ask me. Which is open as well. We don't want to lock people with one technology. I think it's very important that the technology has to be open, especially when you look at different countries. As Kristof was saying, it's not necessarily easy to be relevant in 3 or 4 countries with the same level of relevance, because sometimes what could be perceived as a competitor as a better technology, and we'll be happy to buy this technology. We want to be agnostic on the hardware, and we will be agnostic on the hardware. And then we rely on the software platform, open software platform, which is based on open standard as well, which is key. As for probably I don't think there is anyone in the room that will probably say that we have to bet on proprietary systems in order to build this stuff. But anyway, we will do it, and this is what we've done for years, because this is a way to build all the different layers and to add on some value-added services as well, notably on payment systems, on this kind of stuff. So on the last but not least, which is very important, is to offer an access to a network of charge point outside the business or outside the home, which is relevant. As of today, there is a kind of increase. You can access 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 2 million charging stations, but most often, when when you are a customer, for example, if you are in Lyon here, having access to 20 or 30,000 charging stations in the Netherlands doesn't really mean a lot for you. What you need is in your area, and to this extent, I think there is a lot of progress still to be done. At least probably for the largest country in Europe, such as Germany, France, which are big territories.
Yeah. And when you actually
so I think these three pillars are very important. Energy, infrastructure, and access to a relevant network.
Yeah, and when you go to a conference, you actually need the charging points outside to work, right? I'm not saying anything else, but yeah. So Total is a very large energy firm. I think it's one of the top 4 oil companies in the world. And now you're going into electric mobility. How does that fit into sort of the overall Total as a company scheme?
It's clear that Total is well known for this, being very, from almost 100 years, this very large oil company, in Africa and so on. But it's, when you just look a little bit closer to the strategy, the ambition is to be the major of responsible energy. And energy doesn't mean oil or doesn't mean gas, it means energy that customer needs, It's as simple as that. So we are not in favor of this one against the others, or this one against or vice versa. So the point is to serve customers. It's a very humble position, we want to serve our customers. That's it. Second point is there is a strategy which has been put together, which is called 2040 Outlook, which is basically the roadmap for Total. And the prevision we had, which is more or less similar to what you shown before, is by 2020, our forecast is to have around 700 million electrical vehicles in the world, with 32% of the stock of the fleet, which means, you know, in the most mature region like Europe, for example, or China, it's going to be above 60%. So it's still a massive change. But if we have a look on a broader picture, and especially trying to stick to the 2 degrees C increase for the climate, it's not enough. You know. Even this scenario, which we call momentum, which is basically more or less doing what has been decided by all the political stuff and so on, it's not enough. Because meanwhile, we will have around 2.2 billion of cars in the world. So we will double the number of cars. So as I always say, you know, e-mobility doesn't solve the issue of mobility by alone, and it doesn't solve the issue of climate or energy. So it's clear that it's only one block. We need to address on a massive scale, you know, the renewable energy development, which is taken into account as well. You know, Total is one of the largest player in photovoltaics. And we need as well something which is clearly to be developed, work a lot on CO2 capture, both naturally, which is very simple, is to have forest and to develop forest, and capture the CO2, the CCS technology, which is clearly something that we need to address. Because otherwise, it's not by doing all what we are currently doing, it won't be enough, that's for sure. So it's a kind of responsibility, you know. As a large company, of course, you have some means, but you have some responsibility as well. And this is basically what we want to do. And this mobility is a part of a bigger picture.
Thank you. So fast charging. Juliette, you are the general manager of Izivia, and that's for me. That's a new company. So could you please tell us a bit about yourself and the company?
Yes, with pleasure. Izivia is the new name of Sodetrel. Maybe some of you know Sodetrel. Now Izivia, 100% subsidiary of EDF Group, created 20 years ago, and pure player of electromobility for 20 years, and basically now an operator of charge points. We operate 8,000 charge points across France today. Public charge points on the curbside and private charge points for companies. And also we are an e-mobility operator. We offer access to 90,000 charge points across Europe. But I hear your point, I will answer that. And we have pioneered the development of rapid chargers in France. We today have 200 chargers scattered around France every 80 kilometers on the main French high roads. And we're developing a new grid, a network of rapid chargers. So we have pioneered that subject of rapid charge, which is, I think, one of the cornerstones of the development of electromobility. Not the only one, but one major cornerstone, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So you already sort of have a basic fast charging network between the cities. Going forward, do you see fast charging as only being between the cities, or has it a role to play also within the cities?
Yes, I think clearly that's maybe something that we see now. Going from A to B with your EV is clearly one thing that you want to do with your vehicle. But we think that given that it's sometimes very complicated to have a charge point at home, as you mentioned, when you live not in a house with a garage, but in a flat, or in a house with no garage, which happens, it's sometimes very complicated to charge at home. So in these cases, maybe you'll want to charge when you go shopping at the weekend in the shopping mall, just like you used to do with your fossil fuel car. You spend 20 minutes going shopping, and meanwhile your car charges, rapid charge, at the shopping mall. This is a use case that we believe in also. I mean, we have to answer all those use cases, which will be diverse, and this is one of the use cases that we see. Also having rapid charging in the center of cities for professionals, for taxis, this will be very useful. So all these we have to address. I think it's a number of solutions, a diversity of solutions, and right here in Lyon, we will be installing 631 charge points, very precise, out of which 31 will be rapid chargers in Lyon, in Grand Lyon, to be precise. And this will address the needs of Lyon citizens with private cars and also professionals.
There is so much talk about the sort of next generation of high-power fast charging. 350 kilowatts is going to be incredibly super fast. But when you are working on sort of this next generation of charging network, the Corridor 2 network, if I'm not mistaken, you have opted to go for 50 to 150 kilowatts. Why are you not building 350 from the start?
Okay, there's much discussion about this in the small circle of e-mobility. We will be testing 350 kilowatt stations in 2 locations with Enedis, in Île-de-France, near Paris, and in Valence, near Lyon. So we'll be testing 350. But we think 150 kilowatt is a better compromise, because very few cars will be able to charge in 350 kilowatt, very few. So we're trying to optimize the investment, because this is all very expensive hardware, expensive also to put on the grid. So we think 150, putting a little bit more of 150 kilowatt is a better choice than putting very few 350. This is our choice.
Yeah, so 150 is sort of, you see it's at a sweet spot, where the cost and the sort of speed is more reasonable.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. And
yeah.
It's also more efficient, because in fact you find that even those cars that will charge at 350, they will not be doing that for very long, and quite rapidly the power goes down. So in the end, the real gain in terms of charging time is not so high. So 150, we think, is quite good.
I think that's a very reasonable assumption today, so that's good. We have to touch upon the access and payment systems for especially maybe fast charging. And this is sort of a pain in the mind of the consumers many places. It is difficult to access and pay for fast charging. What are you going to do moving forward?
Okay, I do want to underline that we have made some progress on that. I think interoperability has been, is a reality today, I think, all over Europe, at least in France. I mean, we have the charging, we have the interoperability platform, JIREV, and well, our experience is that it works. I mean, obviously it works. You can now charge with most of the charge points are available for charging for most of the e-mobility operators. I think we have to underline that this works really better than, say, 3 or 4 years ago. However, I see your point. You do have to know a little bit beforehand, sometimes before you launch your charging session. Our experience is that today the RFID card is still the most used device in France, but we do have an app, of course, in case you don't have any RFID card. So this is something that is now very much used, and you can charge even if you have absolutely no OEM at all. You can charge on the corridor stations. Also, we tested the blockchain, so this is a very fashionable subject. We tested within an experimentation called Oslo to Rome, and we had charging sessions operated through the blockchain, which put the charging operator in relation with the OEM through the blockchain. So that was interesting. Also, we all know that 15.11.8 is going to be, of course, a major change for all of us, and the car possibly will be talking directly to the charge point. So this we're preparing, because it will change the client experience, I think. We have to prepare for that, and we are really working hard on that. This, I think, will be maybe the major change in client experience, as well as smart charging, which is a subject we work on also.
Bank cards, are you doing that, or credit cards?
Excuse me?
Credit cards. Can you use credit cards at your chargers?
Credit cards, yes, we do. We do have those. Of course, the hardware has to be. We are not a hardware manufacturer. I'm not like these guys. I'm just an operator. So for it to work, I need the hardware to be compatible. If it is, I can give access to the session with a simple credit card. Yes, of course, depending on the hardware doing that.
So will EVBox provide the hardware with credit cards? Good. Can you use credit cards at KEBA stations?
No, we go with the backend.
Yeah. Okay. In Norway, we've had issues with fast chargers not working quite often, actually. What's your experience from your network in France? Is the uptime good, or do you have issues with the hardware, software, cars?
Yes, that's a real question, Erik. I do agree. As I said, we pioneered with Corridor. 2015 seems a long way now. We were one of the first to deploy those fast chargers, and I think the hardware was also pioneering, I think, a little bit. And I must say that we had to work hard with the hardware manufacturer to make it work perfectly. We're still working on that. I'm happy to say that we now have a solution, and we are going to really improve client experience very rapidly now, but we have had some difficulty, yes, with the hardware. It's the beginning of the market. I think we all agree on that, and we've all had to learn. Us operators, hardware manufacturers, we've all been learning. We now have a little bit more experience, and I think this is really growing, and client experience is really going to be, in the short term, much better.
So in the next 12 months, it's going to be okay, or?
Yes, I mean, yes, in the next 20 months, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And that sort of brings us to Jacques, standardization.
Right.
You're managing director in CharIN in Asia. What is CharIN?
So CharIN is the organization that represents the international charging standard CCS, so combined charging system. It's a plug that you will see most often here in Europe. It's the AC and DC combined in one plug. And our members are basically the DSOs, the grid operators, the charging point operators, the e-mobility service providers, and then of course the hardware and the software makers, and finally also the EV makers. And what we stand for is interoperability. We have heard that word many, many times. And interoperability in theory means any charger that is CCS enabled should be able to charge any EV that is CCS enabled. The next step is to do fast charging. So we talked about 350 kilowatt charging. So we're now already at 450 kilowatt charging, which would mean for, let's say, a private car that wants to drive 400 kilometers, that it would be able to charge within 5 minutes. But 450 kilowatt charging is actually a little bit beyond what the normal user wants. The normal user will be happy with maybe waiting 10 minutes, 350 kilowatt charging or lower. But where 450 kilowatt charging comes in is for trucks, is for buses. But for these guys, it's even not enough. So Tesla, Penske, MAN, bus makers, they are all now together with the members of CharIN developing a new plug to go 1.5 megawatt to 5 megawatt. And this plug will not only be used for EV, but it will also be used for the marine market and also for airplanes. Because there will come a day that you will have, let's say, airplanes that fly with electricity. Maybe not within the next 10 years, but they will be coming. And they will not be propellers, but they will be really the reactor planes, but on electric power. The other point which is important is the upward and downward compatibility. And this is where you mentioned that we see high power chargers, but you see a line building up. Why is that? Because the cars at the moment can take 50 kilowatt, maybe 100 kilowatt. So the 350 kilowatt charger will be talking to the car and say, oh, you are only a 50 kilowatt battery, I charge you slower. And that's how you see the build-up. It doesn't mean because you're 350 kilowatt high power charging that any car can take it. But these cars will come on the market. As usual, it is first the premium cars will come up like the Porsche, which is able to charge actually at 400, 450 kilowatt. So within 3 minutes, the car is charged. This is the premium market. But I expect in the next maybe 5 to 10 years that this trickle down to the other cars. Then last but not least is the communication protocol, the encrypted communication protocol. And that is very, very important because you do not want hackers to go into your car and maybe identify one brand of car and say, okay, let's hack in every car XYZ and let the brakes not work anymore. Who will be responsible? The EV maker, the charging maker, the charging operator, the DSO. So this becomes a very complex situation. So you need from the very, very beginning to start with encrypted communication protocols for payments. When we're talking V2G, everybody says V2G giving away electricity, but there's another flow that needs to come back, and that's money. And that flow also needs to be encrypted so that everything is clearly paid and there is no possibility for strange behavior in the market. Also, roaming is important, I think. If you are traveling from one country to another, you should not have 20 RFID cards in your pocket. You should be able, like you roam with your mobile phone, you go from France to Germany to Austria, you can still use your mobile phone, and the same should happen with your electric car. It's like when you go for petrol, you don't say, I can only take Total fuel. You should be able to go anywhere you can go anywhere you want with your internal combustion engine to fill up your tank. The same should happen with the EV.
Yeah, roaming could be or is important. At the same moment, at the same time, we should remember that the end user, the consumers, we've been ripped off when it comes to roaming on our phones until recently. So we should make sure that that doesn't happen on EVs. But that's a sort of side discussion.
That is something you need then to discuss on a political level.
From where I'm sitting or standing, it seems like standardization is very difficult because every time a new car enters the market, it doesn't work on that charger or it doesn't work on that charger, and you have to update the firmware or the software, or, you know, why isn't standardization standardized?
That's a good point. Standardization should be standardized, yes. So interoperability is something that we really take very, very seriously. And interoperability tests are done all the time. Initially, it was, okay, communication between the car and the charger just to make sure that the battery charges in a normal way. But then people say, well, we also want to have plug and charge. Okay, so we add an additional layer to be able to do plug and charge. And then somebody says, okay, now we want encrypted payments. So we add an additional part. Then comes V2G, then comes wireless charging. And all these communication protocols are a little bit different and need to be added. And in the end, what started maybe with 1 megabyte of code ends up with 100 megabytes of codes. So it can happen that there are some parts where the communication protocol is not happy. And that's why we do every year, at least 3 times a year, EV makers from all over the world, charging operators, charging makers from all over the world come together, and during 3-4 days we do test sessions, and we identify problems which we then can update.
So the industry is actually working on this to make it work. That's good.
And so an importantly side business that is coming up is equipment that is being manufactured by, let's say, hardware makers and software makers who provide all kinds of test cases to check if the car reacts normally, if the charger reacts normally. And these test cases is not something like 1 minute, try something. No, these test cases can take 8 hours, 24 hours of testing. And these, let's say, these black boxes will probably by 2020 be used as a standardization of the standard. And then homologation can kick in. So third parties anywhere in the world, in any country in the world, would then be able to do an homologation of the charger of the car. So that whatever arrives here in Europe, let's say from Korea, from China, from Japan, is really an interoperable product.
Are you working anything at all on the standardization of the user interfaces on the chargers as well? Or only on sort of the back-end communication which we can't see as a consumer?
So only on the back end. However, we also give some proposals, white papers, of what type of information should be available on the charger,
Because
but it's not a standard.
Yeah, this is very different from charger to charger today.
Yeah, so we
And,
only make proposals. Because some people want to see how many kilowatt goes in the car, some charging makers don't put that in, so it's just depending on the user.
You actually have local regulations on that. So I'm not sure that you can have something really European, or worldwide at least.
But you could, more chargers could give more basic information. But that's also a very sort of sidetrack. We could be discussing that for hours. You mentioned vehicle to grid. CHAdeMO has that in place already. When is CCS going to follow suit?
It already exists, V2G. When you say CHAdeMO, everybody can do V2G. As I mentioned before, the most important part is not only giving the electricity back to the grid, but is getting revenue, and to make sure that these money streams also are clearly defined and arrive in the right place. So V2G is already being tested. We did just recently a seminar, not a seminar, a test symposium where all the car makers and all the charging makers and all the DSOs that wanted to come in tested V2G protocols. And it is expected by the beginning of 2020 that the protocol will be available. But having the let's say the standard available is one thing. Then the next step is that the car makers need to integrate hardware and software in the car that allows for V2G, and the same thing for the chargers. So then this will trickle down, and I assume that by 2025 V2G will slowly but surely become a reality. And I think the government plays an important role to really push to say to the EV makers, this is now mandatory. Yeah. And maybe to the charging makers, this is now mandatory.
Yeah. But that's still quite a few years off then for on your...
Right, but it's already available. But so let's say the dream of having V2G will become reality by, I would say, 2025.
And what about wireless charging? How is the standardization and CCS?
So wireless charging, so we're also doing that because we don't want that one car maker has one type of wireless charger and then another car maker has another one. It should be a standard so that once you have bought a car with one charger, it should be able to charge other cars. But then there is also health issues that are concerned with wireless charging. I think the World Health Organization says that the maximum power that can be emitted where people are around is something like 3 or 4 kilowatt. So if you have a pacemaker, it can influence. I have seen wireless charging that goes up to 60 kilowatt for buses in China, but then they put the buses in a cage. Everybody goes away, far, far away from the charger, and they start charging. But wireless charging will probably be important for example, autonomous driving, where the cars, where the driver doesn't go out and plug in, but you will have certain areas where a car can go and charge.
Okay, so thank you. We're getting close to the end of the session. If anyone in the audience has 1 or 2 great questions, we have time to ask them. But then you need to raise your hand, and I can't see you anyways, actually. But maybe if you raise your hand and say, I want to ask a question, if you have one, please do that now. No questions? Okay.
Actually, I come from Asia.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to know anything about the Asian EV environment, I can maybe 5 minutes talk about that. Unless you're not interested. Yes, oh, all right. So let me talk about the China miracle. Everybody talks about EVs in China, 1 million, 2 million cars. There is a little story behind why there are so many EVs. It's not that the people want to have an EV, they are forced to have an EV. Because in China, you have heard about Beijing, Shanghai, there's a lot of pollution going on. And so car ownership is restricted. In Shanghai, you have to go to an auction to get a license plate. And during the auction, the prices range around 20,000, 25,000 euro for a license plate. In Beijing, they say, well, we are much more democratic. We will do, we do a lottery. But the problem with the lottery is that there are about 3 million people who want to buy a car, and there is only 20,000 license plates available every month. So what does the government say? Well, if you buy an EV, we give you the license plate for free. And everybody, great, let's buy EVs. Then the problem actually starts for the owner of the EV, because interoperability is a huge problem in China. So people don't dare to drive further away than, let's say, their safe area where they know that charger over there will be able to charge. So if you want to drive from Beijing to Shanghai, which is about 1,000 kilometers, you need to recharge, let's say, at least 2 times. But since you already have the experience in your own city that you might not be able to charge, they don't take the risk to take their EV down to the south. So you have all these great chargers sitting everywhere in China, high power charging, 60 kilowatt, 100 kilowatt, and nobody uses them. And this is something which I would like to mention, because don't always think how great it is. There is always a story behind it. Yeah.
So we need strong incentives and we need standardization. The last point on my paper is conclusion by the moderator. I'm the moderator, so I'm going to conclude. The EV market is sort of exploding. The grid side is planning to fix it, good. The manufacturers of the hardware, they're telling us that they're going to make a lot cheaper boxes in the next 12 to 24 months, good. The fast charging network is growing, the standardization is going ahead, and the traditional oil industry is also entering the EV market. I think this is going to be very interesting to follow for the next couple of years. I would like to thank all the participants for their insights and their time today. Please give them a warm applause. And I really hope they have coffee outside. So we should go check. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. And thank you.